So we are reading Hands of Light by Barbara Brennan. We are on part 4, and we will be going on to introduction, into the introduction section, and then on to chapter 14 of the book. We are on page 149 of the PDF.
Niket, we were going to repeat the last one because it was.
Part 4, the perceptual tools of the healer. And though the Lord give you the bread of adversity and the water of affliction, yet shall not thy teachers be removed into a corner any more, but thine eyes shall see thy teachers. And thine ears shall hear a word behind thee, saying, This is the way, walk in it. When you turn to the right hand, when you turn to the left.
So what is so what is this talking about, right? It is talking about guidance. And I keep repeating and saying that nothing is hidden. If you have the eyes to see, the ears to hear, the feelings to touch, the ears to hear, right? You can get anything. Nothing in this world is hidden. So what he is talking about in this passage is that you will get the guidance whenever you need the guidance. Just one second.
Introduction, the cause of illness. From the perspective of a healer, illness is the result of imbalance. Imbalance is a result of forgetting who you are. Forgetting who you are creates thoughts and actions that lead to an unhealthy lifestyle and eventually to illness. The illness itself is a signal that you are imbalanced because you have forgotten who you are. It is a direct message to you and tells you not only how you are in imbalance, but also shows you the steps that will take you back to the real self and health. This information is very specific if you know how to secure access to it.
So this is very clear, right? When a healer approaches anyone, whatever the illness may be, the healer will approach it on the basis that there is an imbalance in the system. Now, the imbalance or the illness which is there to show us or show you what is an imbalance. Because if the symptom did not show up, then you would not know that there is an imbalance. So an illness or a symptom is very, very useful for us so that we can create balance again in our systems, right? Now, the illness ultimately is a result of the thought. So what are your thoughts? How are you thinking? How are you managing your internal weather pattern? That starts to become very, very important. What is your lifestyle? What are you doing? What are your actions? What are your thoughts again, right? These are the things which actually cause the imbalance. So the moment you rectify the imbalance, the illness will automatically get removed.
Illness can thus be understood as a lesson you have given yourself to help you remember who you are. Immediately, you will think of all kinds of exceptions to this statement. But most of them will limit you to a perception of reality that only includes this particular lifetime and only life in the physical body. My scope is, however, a more transcendental one. The above statements can only be understood in a whole and healthy way if you already accept yourself as existing beyond the physical dimensions of time and space.
So again, we come back to the first statement that we talk about in the gateway affirmation in the Monroe Institute programs, is that we are more than our physical body. So anything that is happening to us is much more than what is really happening to us in this 3D environment. Okay. That's extremely important to understand.
The statements can only be felt as loving if they also include you as a part of the whole, and therefore the whole. They are based upon the idea that individuation and wholeness are the same. That is, a prior the whole is made up of the individual parts, and the individual parts are therefore not only part of the whole, but like a hologram, are in fact the whole.
So what does this imply? That we are a part of the whole is a part of us. So anything that is happening to us is happening to the whole, and anything that is happening to the whole is happening to us. That is why we call this reality that we exist in a collective conscious manifestation of the reality, right? We are in a thought responsive universe, and whatever all of us as humanity and other sentinel creatures, as well as inanimate objects, we through our fields are actually creating this reality that we exist in. So we are a part of the whole, and the whole is a part of us.
Bhaiya, can I ask you something?
Yes, of course.
Bhaiya, this talks about that. It's almost sounding like the Ho'oponopono.
Yeah.
So if that is what it is, that means with all the cures that have come, why is cancer so much increasing? I
Yeah,
mean,
because-
now you're
because-
finding more and more people getting it.
So now if you really see, what are you putting yourself to notice? This is something that I was going to address to you directly. But what are you noticing more these days? You are noticing more cancer, and you are tuning into the frequency of cancer. So that's why more and more cancer is coming into your awareness. It's like you suddenly today you decide to buy a car. Okay, now when you're traveling on the road, you will suddenly start noticing more of those cars. Right? Yes, cancer has as a whole become more prevalent, but that is also because of the electromagnetic radiations that we are subject to, the kind of quality of food that we are subject to, the kind of physical activity that we are subjecting ourselves to. So all those factors will definitely come into play. Right? So, but having said that, I'm talking specifically to you. You are tuning in more to the frequency of cancer. So that's what's coming in more into your life. Okay, and I'm saying this from the posts that you're making in the healing group.
Okay.
Okay. So you have to shift your perspective also. You look at health. You start looking for health rather than looking for illness. If you
No,
get
I've talked from this point because the other day someone was mentioning that earlier there was supposed to be cancer 1:4, and today it's become 1:2, the statistics. So I said, but with all the cures that are coming, why should it be on the increase? It should have gone decreasing, no?
So the cures are not there. The body heals itself, right? So again, I repeat, the electromagnetic radiations which we are subjected to, the kind of stress that we are all subjecting ourselves to all the time. So those factors definitely start playing a part in the whole game. Okay, but now you need to shift your perspective to look for health rather than for ill health. Okay.
How does one do that? What do you mean
by noticing what you want to notice? Simple.
But when something comes glaring at you, then what can you do?
What do you focus your attention to? That's the basic fact.
Okay.
What are you noticing more? That's the question you need to ask yourself.
May I ask you something? Is it like what you start looking for, that's what comes up? Like suppose somebody is doing flower arrangement or gardening, they will always see flowers where they are growing.
Correct, exactly.
This thing. And whereas and if you're not into it, then you just pass by without even noticing.
Correct. That's what I'm telling you. So what are you noticing?
So that means, no, but what Renu said now, I come to that. That means if somebody is sick, it does come up to you. Are you supposed to say you feel that the person is healthy? I mean,
no.
then how do
See,
you do that?
it is the frequency that you're radiating, right? So the frequency that you're radiating, that is what is going to come into your life.
Okay.
So if you are radiating that usko cancer ho gaya, usko cancer ho gaya, usko cancer ho gaya, usko
Okay.
cancer ho gaya, so that
Will
is what
come-
is going to come into your life now.
Okay. Okay.
Rather focus on how good that person is looking. In spite
Mm.
of this issue, she's looking good, she's looking fine, she's
Okay,
looking
that's-
healthy,
yeah,
she's
that's what
smiling. Let's go and play a game with her. Let's have a good time with her. Now you can focus your attention on the good things now. But what are you
Right.
focusing your attention on? That is the question
Right.
you need to ask.
So becoming stressed over it is not going to help anybody, the person who's getting stressed, and the patient also. So
Absolutely.
you
You're
have
getting
to-
stress keeping that other person in mind. So that other person, you're going to transfer the stress to her or to him. What's the point?
Okay.
ठीक
Got
है,
it.
change हो गया, that's an occurrence, right? But you don't need to get it into your head.
Okay.
Yes, Sagri.
Thank you.
Got it, Bhaiya. Thank you.
Also, I guess using your favorite tool to get into the right side of the grid would help.
Absolutely, 101%. That's the game that we are playing. That we
Yeah.
have the grid, which is a very, very powerful tool of perception, that what is the state of consciousness that you're operating from, and figure out how you can move from the left to the right. Very simple. Absolutely right, Sagri. Anything else, Sagri?
No, just to say that, so, okay, you're seeing someone and, we do feel as empathetic beings, we do feel for people if they're not well, but that's really not helping them because you're entraining to that frequency.
Correct. So
in a
you need to
way,
entrain to the higher frequencies within them.
Yeah. So if you set yourself right, they will probably benefit from that because they will entrain to your higher frequencies.
Correct.
Yeah. Thank you.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right.
During my own personal growth process that took place over the years while I was making energy field observations as a counselor, two major changes occurred that drastically changed my way of working with people. The first was that I began to receive guidance during sessions from spiritual teachers as to what to do in the sessions. And I began to look and ask for specific kinds of information pertaining to different levels of the aura. The second was.
So 1 second. Right. So what does she say over here? She started working with the field and she opened herself up to guidance to receive instructions as to what to do. And she started asking questions. Now, what does this remind us of? Of the one breath technique, that we are going into a system, we are going into a situation. We can always open ourselves up by asking the one breath technique, using the one breath technique and asking questions. Now, one thing that we really get to understand in the excursion is that unless you ask the right questions, you're not going to get the right answer. So we need to learn how to ask the right questions. Okay. Again, I come back to what we were discussing. What are we focusing on? So if my questions, I say, okay, what will heal the cancer? Rather, the question needs to be what will bring health into the system of this person. So how are we asking the question? What are we noticing? Again, starts to come into the game.
The second was that I began to develop what I call internal vision. That is, I could see into the body somewhat like an X-ray machine. My practice slowly turned from that of a counselor to that of a spiritual healer.
Right. So a counselor is counseling at the mundane 3D level of reality that we tend to exist in. A spiritual healer goes into transcendental kind of a visioning as to what may actually shift or create shifts in the person concerned. Right. Now, this comes with practice. It comes with associating with the thing. In the Resilience Advantage program, we talk about 3 kinds of intuition. You have practical intuition, you have learned intuition, and you have spiritual intuition, right? So what she's talking about here is the spiritual intuition, where you are actually guided, you are actually told, it's a download as to what needs to be done and what needs to happen. This is very important for any healer, because you don't rely on tests, on physical tests. You rely on feeling, you rely on perceiving where is the shift and then acting on it.
Healing became first an extension of the therapy and then the central core of all therapy, because it reaches all the dimensions of the soul and body, far beyond that which the therapy was able to do. My work became clear. I was healing the soul, or becoming a channel to help the soul remember who it is and where it is headed in those times it forgets and gets off track in disease or illness.
So now this is important, right? We've discussed this before many times in many occasions, that today we all have a life purpose. And an illness basically is taking us away from our life purpose. It comes as a gentle reminder that you're not achieving the purpose of what you wanted to achieve. Having said that, of course, it may be the life purpose of someone to experience an illness, but generally speaking, that is not. We all come here for growing, for learning. And if you're shifting out of our life purpose, then that is what causes all the problems that we start experiencing in our life.
This work has, for me, become very fulfilling, full of ecstasy in the experience of high energies and angelic beings who come to heal. At the same time, it is challenging to face the pain of terrible physical illness, which the healer must experience to some extent in order to heal.
So, the healer is making a connection with the body system of the patient to understand what the patient is going through. Of course, many healing energies come through the healer also, right? If the healer starts thinking that I am doing the healing, the healer is gone, right? Because the ego, the small guy, has started to come into play. The most important thing is that you will also experience something, right? To understand what the client or patient is going through, you must experience it for yourself. So whether you like it or not, you are also going to touch the thing. But the trick here is to be able to not get affected by it, to understand it, but not get affected by it. Again, this is something that you learn over a period of time.
I had to let myself see the tremendous energy and soul imbalances that many people live with. Humanity carries with it terrible pain, loneliness, and deep longing to be free. The work of the healer is a work of love. The healer reaches into these painful areas of the soul and gently reawakens hope.
So something that has been blocked, something that has been kept out of the notice of the person concerned, that is cleared up. It's like you're seeing your image on a mirror, but the mirror is dirty. So you never see a clear image. So the healer actually just clears the mirror so that you can actually see yourself for yourself.
She or he gently reawakens the ancient memory of who the soul is. She or he touches the spark of God in each cell of the body and gently reminds it that it is already God. And already being God, it inexorably flows with the universal will towards health and wholeness.
So all of us, as a rule, are actually flowing towards health and wellness. The only thing that keeps us in the states that we are in is the small guy, is the ego. The moment we start stepping out of the ego and allow and start getting into the flow of the universal consciousness, automatically the illness will not be there, right? Now, when I say the illness will not be there, physically you may have illness, right? But what happens is that it doesn't affect you adversely. You treat it as a lesson. You transcend it, you grow with that illness. Rather than the illness becoming a pain, it becomes a pleasure. You understand it. And the better you understand it, the better you will transcend it.
In the next few chapters, I will discuss the process of illness and the process of healing as seen from the point of view of the spiritual teachers. I will share with you some of my experiences of spiritual guidance in the professional setting and discuss in detail high sense perception, how it works, and how you can learn it. I will also present Haven's view of reality. All of this is important to understand in order to learn the healing techniques presented in part 5.
So high sense perception, right? So this is basically more clairvoyance. You're getting into clairaudence, clairvoyance, clairsentient. You're actually being able to see and perceive what is happening. So in our normal conscious awareness, we are perceiving so much. The electromagnetic frequency is actually so much. And then because of high sense perception, we are expanding it to so much. So we can actually perceive more than what a normal person can start to perceive.
Chapter 14, the separation of reality. As can be seen in chapter 4, the idea presented by Newtonian mechanics that the universe is composed of separated building blocks of matter became outmoded in the early 20th century.
So again, Newtonian physics was outdated in the 1900s, right? But the unfortunate part is that today in physics, Newtonian in Indian schools, at least till as I know it, Newtonian physics is still what physics is all about. They hardly talk about quantum mechanics, theory of relativity. It's just like theory of relativity. Relativity is just one chapter. Quantum physics, so they never even spoke about it when we were in school. But this Newtonian physics was outdated in the 1900s. But we are still teaching that. So what are we teaching the children? What is the exposure that the children are getting again starts to come into the question.
Much evidence has been presented by our scientists that show that we are all always interconnected. We are not separate beings. We are individuated beings. It is only our old Newtonian habits of thinking that lead us to these concepts of separation from the whole. They simply are not true. Let me show you an example of what interpreting self-responsibility from the point of view of separateness can do.
Right. So we are not separate beings. So we are not separate beings, and this has been proven over and over again. In fact, there's one story, I forget the book in which I read, I think it was Conscious Universe, where they talk of an experiment where they took a DNA sample of a person, right? And they started, the person was also hooked up to all kinds of monitors. And the DNA sample was also hooked up into all kinds of monitors. I mean, of course, through the solution or whatever, I don't know how they did it. But they found that whenever the person was stressed, the DNA sample showed stress. Now they started with the DNA sample and the person in the same room. Okay. Then they started shifting, the person was put in the next room. Then the person was put in another section of the building. Then the person was put into another building, but the experiment remained. And they were taking real-time video photography of the person as well as the Petri dish or whatever that DNA sample was in, right? And it immediately showed there was no time lag. If something happened to him there, it happened here right now. There was no distinction between the time. Then they put him in another city, the same thing happened. They put him in another country, the same thing happened. They put him across the world, the same thing happened. So whether we like it or not, we are all interconnected and interrelated because the DNA is a part of us. It is a part of us and we are the whole, okay, when we are bringing it down. So if anything happens to us, it happens to the DNA. And we are also conceived of the universe. So we are a part of the universe and the universe is a part of us. Again, that concept starts to come in here.
Suppose a small child contracts AIDS from a blood transfusion, for example. If that event is interpreted from the separation point of view, one may say, oh, poor victim. From the popularized version of self-responsibility, one might say, oh, he created it, so it is his fault. But from holism, one would say, oh, what a hard lesson that brave soul and family have chosen to learn from their greater reality. What can I do to best help them? How can I best love them? How can I help them remember who they are?
So again, very clearly, right? What are the questions that you are asking? What are you focusing on? So over here, you can say that, hi, usko to cancer ho gaya, ya usko to AIDS ho gaya, right? Or you can say, okay, they've got AIDS, they have a lesson coming up. How can I support them and help them to come into homeostasis? How can I help them to come into balance? How can I get them to come into the flow? How can I support them so that they maintain their equanimity, right? So what is the question that you are asking again starts to become very, very important. And that's self-talk. What is your internal weather pattern when you're going to meet someone who's going through a stressful situation?
Anyone who approaches life in this manner finds no contradictions between responsibility and love, and a great deal of difference between responsibility and blame.
So, right. So now as soon as you get into the blame game, you are cutting your own feet, because as soon as you blame someone else, you lose authority. You lose the power to do anything about anything. And you are totally operating on the left side of the grid, right? So the more you get into acceptance, the more you get into taking responsibility, the more you are operating out of love and compassion, the more you're on the right side of the grid, and the more manifestation you will be able to do.
The view from individuation and holism promises respect and acceptance of whatever other fellow human beings experience. On the contrary, statements like, oh, you created your cancer, I wouldn't do a thing like that, are made from the perspective of separation, not individuation.
So again, when you, so the way you say the words, the tone that you use, the pitch that you use, the speed of speaking that you use makes a big difference on what you're communicating. What is the body language that you're using, right? Again, I come back and again I'm repeating, the grid is a beautiful way to understand for ourselves where are we operating from, right? And if we are operating from the left side of the grid, it's better not to say anything. It's better not to do anything. Because if you are going to do, you're only going to depress and pull the person down. You're not going to create value for the person in any case, right? So the point here is very clear. You have to understand where you are operating from when you are communicating with a person who's going through a stressful situation.
Separation promotes fear and victimhood. Fear and victimhood only support the illusion of powerlessness. Responsibility and acceptance promote power, power from within to create your reality. For if you unconsciously had something to do with making things the way they are, then you can have a great deal to do with creating things the way you want them to be. Let us look at the processes of forgetting more clearly.
So again, very, very important, right? When we take responsibility, when we get into acceptance, when we get into love and compassion, we have power in our hands. We create our reality. So yes, it is true to a certain extent that we created the stressful situation that we are undergoing. But then if we are the creators of that situation, we have the power to transcend it. So what is the first question that we ask when you're in a stressful situation and you realize that you're on the left side of the grid? You ask yourself the question, what are the tools that I have in my toolbox which will allow me to get from the left to the right side of the grid? And then you apply the tool. That's what we are talking about in all the programs, and we are consciously talking about it. How do I rehash the situation in my head so that it converts me or pulls me to the right side of the grid rather than letting me operate from the left side of the grid? And again, I keep repeating, no manifestation takes place from the left side of the grid. Every manifestation will only take place from the right side of the grid. So you're going to support someone who's ill, but you yourself are on the left side of the grid. Better not to go, better not to attempt to be in the presence of that person, because you're going to create a problem rather than create a solution. Because you yourself are going in with a depleting energetic field. So it really doesn't make sense.
As children, only a small portion of our internal experience is verified by those around us. This creates an internal struggle between self-preservation and confirmation from others. As children, we needed a lot of confirmation. We were in a learning stage, and that learning was based on confirmation from the outside world.
So now this becomes very, very important, right? Many times we reject what a child is perceiving. But if we can indulge the child and actually hear out what they are perceiving, how they are perceiving, what are their processing methods of what they are perceiving, we can create a very healthy environment for them. Okay. When we look at something, it is always being looked at by a perspective. How did we learn about it? So yes, it is our duty to explain to our children that, okay, this is a similar situation that I experienced, and this is the way that I handled it or dealt with it. But you please make your choice as to how you are going to be dealing with this situation. The other fact is that from the age of 1 to 6, the perceptive abilities of a child are greatly enhanced compared to what we as adults can actually perceive. So many times the child will be perceiving stuff like actually seeing auras, sensing spirits, sensing energy fields around them, etc., etc. Imaginary playmates, like we consider them imaginary playmates, but for the child that playmate is very, very real. And as a matter of fact, they actually may be real. It's only that we ourselves as adults have lost the ability to perceive them. They may play with imaginary toys, but the field of that toy is there, and the child can actually perceive the field. So for the child, that toy is real, right? But having said that, we adults keep rejecting what the child is perceiving, because the child is constantly looking for confirmation from people around them. So we have to be very careful. What are we saying to a child? Because it can turn down that perception that allows the child to perceive, right? We need to enhance their ability to perceive, not to shut it down, which is what unfortunately happens in most cases. But my view is that we need to encourage the children to perceive.
As a result, we either created secret fantasy worlds or we rejected much of our unconfirmed inner reality and found a way to store it for later verification.
So now this becomes important, right? If the adults are not confirming what they are perceiving, they will either go into a fantasy world and stop telling the adults, or they will shut it down, right? And it's an unfortunate thing, because this is something which is so powerful and can be so helpful for the children going forward. It's not funny.
Another way to explain the process is that we blocked off our experiences, be they images, thoughts, or feelings. Blocking effectively walls us off from that portion of experience, at least temporarily. We wall ourselves off from ourselves. This is another way of saying we forget who we are.
Now, this is something that we constantly encounter in biofield tuning, especially when we are doing the timeline, that there is a wall, right? You have blocked off that experience. Now, but That experience is a part of you. So if you're blocking off a part of you, then you are not whole. So integration of that starts to become very, very important. Again, this is something that happens in the excursion workshop, also in the release and recharge exercise, which is a very powerful exercise for us to reintegrate ourselves. In shamanism, they have something called soul portion retrieval, right? Where the shaman goes into an altered consciousness, looking for soul portions of that person who is in under trauma or under stress, retrieves that portion and puts it back into the system. So this is something that has been happening for a long time. It's not, shamanism is like, I mean, it was the first method of healing, right? So it is there, been there all the time, right? The only thing is that we have forgotten about it. We are not looking at it. We are not creating integrity. We are creating separatedness by not listening to especially children.
In chapters 9 and 10, we dealt extensively with blocks in the auric field. The effect of these blocks, when seen from the auric point of view, is to disrupt that healthy flow of energy throughout the auric field and eventually to cause disease. They become what is sometimes called stagnated soul substance. They are blobs of energy consciousness that individuated beings, that are cut off from this rest of us. Let us look at this process using the Gestalt idea of the wall.
So again, when we cut ourselves off from these feelings, from these fields, from these energies, they stagnate, right? Now, if energy stagnates, it starts to rot. It's like water. So movement of energy is extremely important. Otherwise, the energy, which is actually life-giving force, starts to become a depleting force. It starts to eat you from inside out. Okay. So it's very important for us to start clearing these fields.
Whenever you experience discomfort, you are in some way experiencing the wall you built up between the greater integrated you and a part of yourself. That wall serves to hold back a portion of yourself that you do not want to enter into your experience of the moment.
So what does this imply? Right, that we have certain experiences that we don't want to visit again, right? Unless we integrate them, it is still going to be hanging in the field. So integration of those feelings, of those, what is the lesson you need to learn from that particular experience that you had, starts to become very important, right? If we hold it off and we cut it off, then it becomes a problem. It will come and bite you at some point in time or the other, right? It will come and bite your backside, boom. And that's when the problem starts. So the clearer you become in your field, the better it is for you. Yes, Renuji?
Bhaiya, sorry, but what do you mean by stagnation of energy?
So whenever you block
movement of energy and stagnation, how can
correct.
you?
So I'll tell you. Now, suppose you had a traumatic experience. I keep using this example in biofield tuning, where let's say you were there at the age of 4 and you had a very big fight with a very dear friend of yours, right? And you got very traumatized. So there was a release of energy at that moment in time. You got angry, entropy was high, you release that energy. Now that energy has not got used. It is not dissipated. You have not transcended it. So it is hanging in your field, right? Now, when it is hanging in your field, it is stagnated over here. It is stuck in your auric field, right?
Okay.
Now, whenever anything related to a friendship comes into your field, because it is vibrating at the same resonant frequency of that blob of energy which is stuck in your field, that blob of energy will color or influence that energy that is coming into your field, which is related to friendship.
Yeah, I remember your example, but what do you mean by that you haven't dissipated. I mean, you've sort
So
of
this
accepted
energy is
that,
stagnated
it's
here,
over.
right? No, this energy is stagnated here. You've not transcended this
What do you mean by
experience.
transcended it?
Transcended means dissolve this energy which is stuck here.
So how are you supposed to do that?
By accepting the knowledge and the learning that you are due to get from that field.
Got it. Now I've got
Right.
it. I've got
So this you experienced as a child. Now, from the
Hmm.
perspective of a child, this was a huge thing.
Hmm.
Right. But when you experience it as an adult, you have the vision, the experiences, the understanding of an adult. When you look at the same traumatic event from the experience of an adult, then it stops holding relevance to you. And then that field dissolves. So that's what we do in biofield tuning also. That when we come into a blob, we then tell the person that, see, this is related to your school, and it feels that this is what happened in your school, or this is a thing that happened with this person, kind of a person, right? Now with the adult understanding, they understand that, okay, this is what this is, and then and as soon as they understand, this thing dissolves. Because now the lesson has been learned, there's no use for it to be here anymore. But till the lesson is not learned, it will get stuck over here.
Right. So that means anything happening to us today, if supposing we were to sort of get a little deep into it and see as to what is the lesson behind it, that means we are actually transcending. We are not allowing it to get stuck in our field.
Absolutely.
Right? Okay. That's what I was.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Bhaiya.
Thank you.
With time, the wall grows stronger, and you forget that it is a portion of yourself that is walled off. That is, you have created more forgetting. It begins to appear that what is walled off is something from the outside, that the wall appears to hold back some dreaded force from the outside. These internal walls are created over eons of soul experiences. The longer they stand, the more they appear to be keeping something other than self away from the self. The longer they stand, the more they appear to create safety, but the more they solidify the experience of separation.
So again, when we look at it again from the biofield perspective, if I'm scanning, this is the outside of the edge of the aura, and I'm coming this way, the wall will be here, right? So any experience that you're getting is going through the field and getting stuck on the wall. So we experience the wall as if it is helping us in keeping stuff out, but it is actually keeping a portion of ourselves, because this is what we also represent, right? So it's actually keeping a portion of ourselves away from us. So we become separate. We are not whole anymore, right? So that's why dropping these walls and clearing these walls become very, very important.
Exercises.
Can I ask you one thing?
Yeah, please.
Is it because that's how a person keeps making the same mistake over and over again?
Correct.
In life.
So that is what we keep telling people, right? Look at the patterns in your life. What is repeating? When something is repeating, it means the universe wants you to deal with it. The universe wants you to understand what this life lesson is all about and then transcend it. Because if you're not going to learn the lesson, that is what is going to show up again and again in your reality. Now, let us take this cancer example. How many people on this group are dealing with people who have cancer? Can I have a show of hands? Just in the system, please. Raise your hand in the system. Right, now we've got 22 people here. How many hands were raised? Are you all understanding what I'm saying? And repeatedly, that is what is coming into your reality. So now who's creating it? Are you all getting what I'm saying? Okay.
So somewhere we've picked it up and we haven't transcended it.
Correct. So there's a lesson for you all to learn in that, right? So what are you doing about it? Are you operating from the left side of the grid or the right side of the grid?
Okay. Left side, because you keep thinking about that.
Exactly. What are the problems with that, right? Now look at what are the good things that have resulted.
Yes.
What is happening with that? What is the value that has been created? That is when you will transcend it. Okay?
Thank you.
Exercises to explore your inner world. To explore your worlds, you can use the following exercise. Bring to memory a particularly unpleasant situation, either one you are struggling with currently or an unresolved one from the past. Begin to experience what that situation felt like. Picture it in your mind. Hear the words or sounds associated with that experience. Find within that experience the fear it contains. Fear is the feeling of being separated. As you are able to bring yourself back into that state of fear, begin to perceive also a wall of fear. Feel it, taste it, see it, smell it. What is its texture, its color? Is it light or dark, sharp or hard? What is it made of? Become the wall. What does it think, say, see, feel? What does this portion of your consciousness believe about reality?
So again, whenever we want to transcend a wall, we need to perceive it, right? Most of the time, we are not even aware that we have created a wall around us. And that is where the problem lies. The moment you can bring that perception of that wall into your conscious awareness, you put yourself into a position to be able to deal with it, right? Why? Because now you are in control, you know what is happening. But when it is at an unconscious level and it has been created by the ego to protect itself, you cannot deal with it. So very important to become aware of it. So this exercise, what she's talking about, is basically to understand that the wall is there. What does it do for you? Why did you create it? What does it help you with? Right? These are the questions that you need to ask yourself about it.
Haven has given the following explanation of the wall. We will go back to the idea of the wall that you yourself have fashioned in order to maintain what you considered at the time of fashioning an inner equilibrium, but that actually maintains an outer disequilibrium, as in a dike or in locks, where one level of water is higher than the other. So you may see yourself behind this wall and a great flood, a great pressure of power or some form on the outside, with you inside. Your wall then makes up for that which you feel you are lacking on the inner level. In other words, there is this great power coming towards you, and you think you have less power than it has. Then you make a wall to protect you, as when in the medieval ages the walls of the castles were being stormed. You who are inside the wall must first explore the essence of this wall, for it is fashioned of you. It is fashioned of your essence, and it is full of statements. Statements of what you must do in order to remain safe. Now, the wonderful point about all of this is that this wall is fashioned of your essence and contains power within it. That power can be transformed and redistributed as a foundation for the power of the inner self. Or it can be seen as a stairway into the inner self, where that power already exists. That is another way of saying it, depending upon which metaphor suits you best. And so you sit behind your wall of safety, and at the same time, you sit in your wall of safety because you are that wall. It is then the bridge of consciousness between what you as the wall say, and what you as the inner person who is being protected say.
So what does a wall do? Right? It keeps a part of me on this side and it keeps a part of me on the other side. Now, as soon as that happens, it is creating a separateness, right? It is not allowing flow. It is not allowing integration. It is not allowing wholeness to come into the picture, right? So you will always be missing a part of yourself. You may go into a reactivity. You're not comfortable in a particular situation. So the idea is ultimately to drop all these walls that we have created, and these are created by our belief systems. So again, in the Gateway Voyage, the first thing that Robert Monroe talks about is that we need to get out of our boxes. So the box that we have created for ourselves, we need to step out of it. And as we start evolving, we start becoming more accepting of the belief system of others, the ideas of others, how things are occurring to them, rather than sticking to only our point of view. So an expansion of consciousness starts to take place when we start dropping the walls. So that's why I call hemisync process a jhadu maruing process, because it starts to chip on the walls. It starts to make the walls automatically come down. Okay, that's the game that we are actually playing.
Bhaiya, can I ask you something?
Yeah, go
Bhaiya,
ahead.
is this the same thing as putting things under the carpet? Sometimes
Absolutely.
one does handling situations by putting
100%.
it under. So that is also like creating a wall.
Correct. Naturally, it's still there under the carpet, right? At some point in time, you'll have to clear it. At some point in time, it is coming to back your backside, whether you like
Right.
it or not.
So it's
कितना
similar.
कारपेट के अंदर में घुसाएंगे ये बताइए ना.
Yeah. So it's that same thing. Okay.
100%.
Exercise to dissolve your wall. Hold a conversation between you, the wall, and you, the person inside. When that is thoroughly done, then we suggest you hold the same conversation between you and what is beyond the wall and even the wall, and that which is beyond, and continue these conversations until there becomes a flow through that wall.
So basically, what she's saying is now there are three people. What is behind the wall itself, because you have constructed the wall. So the wall is a part of you. And what is coming in, which is outside the wall. You have to create a relationship between the three, ultimately dissolving the wall. For the time being, the communication will go through the wall, right? It will go through the wall. There will be holes in the wall, for example, where the communication starts taking place, right? So it is again the holes that we create in the box that we are in. We need to step out of that box.
Exercise to dissolve your wall. Sorry. Now you can see this wall symbolically on the psychodynamic stage. You can also see it as a representative of that wall between who you are and who you think you are. For you are that power on the other side of the wall too, in whatever form it is. You have power within it, not power over it. The wall represents the belief in power over the power of separation, which is one of the greatest maladies of the earth plane at this time, the disease of power over. And so, if you can find this metaphor within you and without you on not only the psychodynamic level, but the spiritual level and the world level, you can use it as a tool for self-exploration and healing. You can use it as a tool for remembering who you are.
So ultimately, what's the game we want to play? We want to remember who we are, right? Now, if you're attempting to control something, then it is again causing separateness, right? So we read in the book, The Shift over here. What did he say? We need to move from entitlement to humility, from control to trust, and from attachment to letting go. So whenever we create a wall, we are attached. right? We are not liking the results of something. We want to control something. We are operating out of selfishness. We are not operating out of humility. So that is when the walls get created. So the idea is to drop the wall so that you can become whole again, right? Whole again means remembering who we really are. We are part of that Godhead. We are part of the whole. We have simply forgotten that we are part of the whole.
Let us look at the wall from the auric field point of view. As was said earlier, the wall can be seen as an energy block in the aura. In the process of going into the wall, experience it and enlivening it, you are also enlightening the block. The block seen in the auric field begins to move and stops disrupting the natural energy flow. These blocks exist on all the levels of the aura. We affect each other from layer to layer. Let us now look at how a block in one layer of the aura, which of course would be expressed in the reality of that layer, that is, thought, belief, or feeling, can eventually cause an illness in the physical body.
So again, if this block is there in one layer of the aura, it most probably is there in the other layers of the aura also, right? So whenever we are looking at something, these blocks actually cause the imbalances in our body system, which is one of the main causes of any kind of illness that you are actually experiencing. So the game here basically is to understand what causes the wall, to get integrated, to transcend and drop the wall so that flow of energy and experience can take place without being hindered by what the wall is blocking. So the idea is to drop the walls. Okay, I think we can stop here today. So we'll just check.